Come on up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I know people are wandering in after the coffee break. I usually talk to technology crowds, but don't worry, there's not a lot of technology in here. I did put the word in the, do talk about IT in the title, though. So a little about me. I'm president of Intellix. We are an industry advisory and analysis firm focusing on digital transformation. So I work with organizations around the world, helping them understand how to deal with the move to digital from the perspective of dealing with innovation as well as organizational change. So helping with the technology as well as the organizational part of the story. So I'm also a writer for Forbes and Wired, and I'll be putting together some kind of article for Forbes about this conference. So still looking for good ideas, and I'll be here both days to come up with some good ideas. I run an Agile Architecture course around the world as well, and my latest book is called The Agile Architecture Revolution. Okay, so we're talking about digital transformation. So the question here is, well, what are we transforming? Right? Transformation implies that we're undergoing some sort of substantial change. And clearly the focus for many digital transformation efforts is on the customer experience. Right? The interaction with the customer, with the end user. They're now coming to various channels or interacting via social media and web in addition to mobile. And that's obviously a core theme of everything that's going on at this conference. But that's not the whole story, right? We're also transforming technology. And coming from the technology world where I spent a lot of my time, there's enormous transformation going on there as well. A variety of new technologies, not just at the user interface where we're talking about new mobile technologies and advances in terms of web technologies, but also new technologies in terms of cloud and big data and a variety of other transformational movements that are really shaking up the IT world. And then we have the internal organization, and this is a fundamental part of the story that many times digital efforts miss out on, right? If you're transforming, if you're doing a digital transformation, there is internal organizational change that is needed in order to support that, right? And we'll talk about some of the challenges there if you don't reorganize in order to support both a digital effort as well as how do you support the innovation necessary to achieve this level of transformation. So really the answer is all of the above, right? We're transforming all of these because digital transformation really comes down to business transformation. But we can't just say, when we use that word digital, it's all about web and mobile and social, because that's not the whole transformation story, right? When I say transformation, it means transforming our business and how we interact with all of our audiences, customers, partners, as well as internal resources. So one of the key challenges when we start working with businesses who are struggling with this question of transformation and the question of innovation is dealing with optimization. If you think about it, that's how traditional businesses manage, traditional executives manage their businesses, right? You look at your information and you try to optimize what you're doing. So you try to be more profitable, you try to get a greater share of customer, you try to make your marketing that much more effective, right? And you keep doing things that are trying to make everything that much better, right? It's always a battle to optimize. But there's a problem with managing in that way, and that is the problem of local optima. Right? If you're in the woods somewhere, right, there you are, and you want to get to that highest peak, and let's say you can't really see it because you're in the trees, well, you could just walk uphill. And you might end up, if you keep walking uphill, you might end up at the top of the highest mountain in your vicinity. But maybe not. Maybe you'll just end up at the top of a local hill that is not the highest hill, just happens to be the one closest to you. That's the problem of local optima, right? If you're in a business environment and you say, okay, what we want to do today is make all of our numbers, all of our key performance indicators that much better, well, we can optimize and optimize and optimize, and we will improve things. We will achieve our business outcomes, but we won't necessarily end up with the best possible outcome because it may be some hill that we didn't even know about. And that's the challenge of innovation. Right? The innovation is not subject to simply optimizing because we have to introduce some sort of disruption that takes us away from that local hill. So when we talk about optimization, organizations are looking at information, so there's a data story as part of this, They're looking at information in order to establish feedback loops that optimize those business outcomes. So it could be, share of customer or revenue or profit, whatever the business outcome is you're looking for. Established management practice is focused on optimizing those. But innovation is different, because innovation requires disruption. We have to shake something up, or we have to deal with external disruption that is shaking us up, some sort of new competitive pressure, new technology, new globalization, new regulation, whatever the external disruption is, we have to deal with that better. Or we may want to innovate by introducing our own disruption. But that is essentially essential for enabling creativity to flourish. Because if all you're doing is focusing on optimization, you'll actually stamp out creativity, because you're working at cross purposes with what it takes to achieve a true transformation in your organization. Okay, so what we are trying to achieve now is this notion of innovativeness. What does it mean for an organization to be innovative? Well, this is essentially being able to introduce change into your business environment in order to achieve a strategic advantage, right? Increase market share, or increase customers, or expanding into new markets. Those are all strategic advantages, and that's the goal of innovation, right? You're trying to achieve more than just tactical advantage, a little bit better, faster, or cheaper, but you're actually trying to do something new and different, and that is the goal of innovativeness. So this requires a level of disruption and a level of creativity that goes beyond traditional management practice. So, innovativeness is actually an aspect of business agility. And business agility is essentially the core topic that we talk about in Intellix. Our fundamental goal is helping organizations achieve greater levels of business agility. So our definition of business agility is the ability to respond quickly and efficiently to change, but also leverage change for competitive advantage. So there's the tactical side of agility, responsiveness and resilience. So responsiveness is responding to change, and resilience is mitigating the risk of adverse change, dealing with bad things that might happen. And innovativeness is the one that is strategic, introducing change on purpose, disrupting on purpose in order to achieve some sort of strategic benefit. Okay, so this is the key, right? Innovation requires disruption. And this is a fundamental principle that, if you think about it, sort of makes sense, right? If you are worried about that local optima problem, where the faster, better, cheaper way of thinking can only take you so far, then you have to shake things up, right? If you're in the woods and that walking uphill is not getting you where you're going to go, you have to try something new and different. Maybe just head off in a random direction for a certain amount of time and then try walking uphill. Or maybe try something different, right? You have to somehow disrupt your situation. Now, this can be very difficult for traditional managers who are thinking in terms of optimization, because disruption is scary, right? It involves change that is inherently unpredictable. So disruption introduces risk, and this is a key challenge, because many organizations are looking to avoid risk. They're risk adverse, so they're trying to do things that lower their risk. Well, if all you're focusing on is achieving those business key performance indicators and lowering your risk, you'll never end up innovating, because innovation requires disruption, and disruption requires risk. You have to take a flyer. And that's essentially what creative people do when they innovate, is they take a flyer. And they go try something new that you haven't tried before, and you don't know if it's going to succeed or fail. So then the question is, well, how can we do this better? Right? Is it just a complete roll of the dice, or can we improve our strategies for innovation? So this is where innovation and optimization work together. Right? If all you're doing is optimization, then you'll stifle innovation, because you're not disrupting enough, right? You don't have enough disruption in your environment, and people will simply do whatever it takes to cut costs, to improve productivity, and make those incremental steps that don't allow for innovation. But if you do it the other way around, disruption without optimization, that's just trying something at random without having any idea if it's going to work. And you might get lucky, but that's a crapshoot. And every once in a while, you'll see a startup just try something new, just some sort of random thing, and it takes off. But for every startup that does that, you have dozens of startups who tried something new and different, and it didn't go anywhere, right? So for a larger organization, you have this question: how do you actually improve your chances of success, given that innovation involves inherent risk? So this is where a measure of optimization comes into play. And if you look at the most innovative organizations, they've sort of boiled this down to a science. So if you look at Apple Computer, for example, they came out with it's not an iWatch, it's an Apple Watch. Well, that's innovative, right? It's sort of a pioneer in a new market, trying to do the same thing they did with the iPad, sort of create this whole new market. Obviously very innovative. But it doesn't mean that they just sort of took a flyer and said, okay, everybody come up with a random idea. How about a watch? Sure, why not? And that was the whole discussion. No, obviously they're a very analytical company. They have a lot of information about consumer buying patterns and about technology trends and quite a bit of information that helps them optimize, but they still allow for the disruptive nature of innovation. So bottom line is you want to optimize what you can and disrupt what you must. And the challenge for the modern manager now is knowing when to do one and when to do the other. Because obviously you still have to optimize, right? You still have to cut costs, improve productivity, get more share of your wallet, more share of your customer's wallet, and all of those traditional management approaches that improve your business. You still have to do those things. You just don't want those to stifle innovation. And you want to innovate, but you don't want to have random crapshoots. You want to get your best results from your innovative efforts, understanding that there's always risk involved, and they won't always be successful, but you want to improve your odds. So this is the key balance. And how do we achieve this? Through the notion of resilience. So resilience, remember, is an aspect of business agility, which means responding to adverse change. So resilience could mean dealing with websites that crash. How do you respond to that? Or it could mean dealing with unexpected situations. You have some sort of new competitive pressure and you don't know what to do. Well, resilience has to do with that. Resilience has to do with dealing with any kind of risk, and this is the risk of either over-optimizing or innovating without appropriate information, and being a resilient organization is a critical part of achieving that balance. Okay, so resilience essentially is the ability to respond quickly and efficiently to negative change in the business environment. So bouncing back from adverse events. So disaster recovery, for example, is part of the story. And it's a tactical business driver, right? It's something you have to do. You have to mitigate risk, but it's not going to give you any strategic benefit in and of itself. So essentially what you're trying to do here is avoid being brittle, right? The opposite of resilience is brittleness, where brittleness means that you're fragile, right? You do something unexpected and things start breaking, whether it's technology or whether it's the organizational part of the story. So a brittle organization, for example, would be one where something new comes along, somebody tries to come up with a new product or service, and the organizational bureaucracy shuts it down, right? That is a brittle organization. So this is a key point, right? If an organization is focused on faster, better, cheaper, they are a brittle organization. Because anytime something comes along that takes them out of their comfort zone, they don't know how to deal with it, right? So faster, better, cheaper actually works against the best interest of the organization. Because not only are they not innovating, but they are also more brittle. They're more subject to failure if they reach those boundaries of what they're comfortable with. And of course, in today's world, there's so much change around us. All of our organizations are being pushed out of those comfort zones all the time. And that's a key part of this digital transformation story. It forces both internal and external, pushing our organizations out of what they know and do best into new areas, right, where they have to innovate and experiment. And there's a greater risk and more unknowns. Well, an organization has to be resilient in order to be able to deal with those situations on an ongoing basis. Okay, so how do you manage? You being not necessarily you personally, but how do you use your organization manage? How do your bosses manage? So if they're doing it really badly, you can point to the pointy-haired boss in your organization. Well, traditional management, you focus on your goals, right? What is the goals of your division? Well, you have certain profit levels, certain customer acquisition, whatever your goals are. and you manage to those goals, right? Traditional management approach. So line of business management drives toward optimizing those outcomes, whether it's maximizing shareholder value or profit or revenue, right? Traditional key performance indicators. It's the better, faster, cheaper approach. Well, it's interesting, better, faster, cheaper at NASA led to the destruction of the Space Shuttle Columbia, right? It's better, faster, cheaper. They started cutting corners, improving profitability, cutting costs, improving their time to market, and that's what led to the situation where they became more brittle, and when they had some sort of event that wasn't expected, it caused a catastrophic failure. So that's the challenge here, is traditional approaches to management and approaches that work well in environments of change are at odds with each other. Okay, so digital, better, faster, cheaper. So within the context of the digital effort, when you start thinking about your web and social media and mobile infrastructure, what does it mean to be better, faster, cheaper? It means trying to squeeze every bit of performance out of your technology. So this is a very important story this year in the digital world, is that slow doesn't work, right? You have to be fast. If your website is 1 second slower than somebody else's, not only will customers leave in droves, but they'll be angry at you for being slow, right? And they will hate you, right? If you're only a second slower, right? And this is becoming more and more the case as more and more organizations figure out how to maximize their web and social and mobile performance. So there's this mobile social web performance battle out there that is pushing technology to its breaking point. So what is performance focusing on? Dealing with failure, right? When does your website go belly up? When do your mobile apps go belly up? Well, you're pushing them to the breaking point, so they're going to break, right? And that's what it means to actually to drive toward these key performance indicators, right? If you go to your boss and say, well, the website could be faster, but it's about 75% as fast as it could be because we just want to play it safe, what's your boss going to say? Well, there's 25, you could go 25% faster and you're not doing it? Well, go faster, right? We're losing customers. We're not making as much money. We have the wrong conversions on our shopping cart, right? These are the traditional management key performance indicators that are driving us to the breaking point. So this is why resilience is so important, right? If we're optimizing, we're pushing ourselves to the breaking point, which means resilience is more important, but we're also at risk of stamping out innovation, which means we have to introduce disruption, which also introduces risk that can lead to failures. So we have to be resilient as well. So where is that performance breakdown? When I say something is going to break, well, yeah, it could be a technology failure, but when you look at the organization as a whole, the weakest link could be anywhere, and more often than not, it is with the people, right? Yes, we're talking about the performance of the website, and something goes wrong. Yeah, it could be technology, but it could be the people, and actually, it's not likely to have a single cause. It's likely to, because all of these components, people and technology, are interconnected. Usually, if there's some sort of failure of the business or the technology, which are now sort of the same thing, it's a complex story of interconnected parts, right? Same thing with the Space Shuttle Columbia. It wasn't that one thing failed, it's that their whole way of thinking about dealing with adverse events was flawed in many fundamental ways. So it's a complex story. You can't just point your finger and say, this is the person or this is the piece of technology at fault. Okay, so how do we achieve the best balance of optimization and agility? What we have here is we have a graph, technology on the bottom, ranging from less flexible to more flexible, and people on the left, ranging from less flexible to more flexible. Obviously, if we're in the lower left-hand corner, we're hurting unit, right? Because we have a rigid and brittle organization with little or no transformation, right? Hopefully, the fact that you're simply in this room is an indication that you're not stuck in that lower left-hand corner. The challenge, though, is that we may run the risk of only moving forward on one axis or the other. What we really want to do, though, is end up with more flexible technology and people as well. So what are some of the problems here? So I have slides on each of these problems. So mistake number one is focusing digital too much on technology. And so far this morning, nobody sort of ran into that problem, right? But I've talked to a lot of organizations that have this challenge. So, well, this is a digital effort. Well, let's do all this technology stuff. Let's build all these apps. Let's do all this web technology and cloud and this and that and the other. But you don't think through the organizational changes that in many ways are more difficult for most organizations. So technology, you can just go buy it, but changing your organization means people have to do things differently, and that can be more challenging. So the risk here is excessive focus on technology, which without thinking about the human side of the digital equation, leads to a variety of challenges. Right, tone-deaf digital efforts. Right, here's the classic one for the last year. Right, Kenneth Cole. Anybody here from Kenneth Cole? Oh, good. Okay, they're like a clothing retailer, right? And they tweeted this right at the riots in Egypt, right? The Arab Spring hit Egypt, all these riots, and they tweet, "Millions in uproar in Cairo. Rumor is they heard our new spring collection is now available online." Well, they sure got blasted for this. I mean, this was the definition of tone-deaf marketing, right? I mean, it completely backfired on them, like right away. Well, what was the problem here? Well, they had this new tool. Ooh, we can use Twitter, but the people in the organization didn't really have the context for how to use it properly, right? So essentially, their technology had made more progress than their people, and that can lead to this kind of issue. Sometimes it's unresponsive mobile. I just connected to the Marriott Wi-Fi from my phone. Anybody try that? So they can get on Wi-Fi with their phone, and you load this page, which is a traditional web page, only it's this small and you can't read it. It's like, hello, Marriott, wake up. If you want to load a page on mobile, it should be responsive, and it should be designed for that interface. Very common problem, right? Again, the technology is there, but the people haven't figured out what they need to do to make the technology work. Right? So a customer service snafu, I won't even go there. Everybody hates customer service, right? I mean, it's just one thing after another. Okay, so I started off saying I wasn't going to talk much about technology. Well, I had to show a picture of some technology, right? Because I'm the techie guy at this conference. So mistake number 2, shifting digital away from IT, where now the human side of the digital effort is more flexible than the technology side, in particular, your existing technology, the IT organization, information technology organization. This is also a very common problem. Digital efforts, people in the room here, you may not be talking to your CIO, to your architects, to your back-end developers, to your enterprise app people, right? You're working on the interface. You're dealing with front-end technology, social, mobile, web. And some organizations don't have this problem, obviously, but the ones that do have this bifurcation, this disconnect between the digital effort and traditional legacy technology. There's that word legacy. Somebody told me I shouldn't use the word legacy because it upsets people. So it's systems of record, as opposed to systems of engagement, which is part of the digital story. But if you think about it, those systems of record, they've been running your business for years, right? That's where the business is, right? If you're financial services, sort of the classic example, if you're a bank, it's not about cash in the drawer anymore. It's a bits on the wire, right? That's what money is today. And what are the systems for keeping track of it? Those are those big old systems back in the data center somewhere that have been cranking away for years. And your IT organization has been supporting them, and their goal is to better support the business, right? But now here's the digital effort going off and doing their own thing, not even giving the IT department a call because they're just whatever it is. They're just a money sink, you don't understand them, right? There's some sort of conflict there, any number of different reasons. The challenge here is that if you leave the legacy behind, you're actually becoming less agile rather than more agile. And this is really the core reason why you have to work with traditional IT, your digital effort, is because they're struggling to achieve greater agility as well, but you're the ones responsible for the customer, right? So they have to be responsible for the customer as well, and if you're not aligned with how you interact with the customer, then you're going to end up with problems. Okay, so there's no shortcut Because enterprise IT, especially when older systems are involved, involves a lot of complex effort, right? And it can be slow and painful and expensive, but it doesn't mean you can just ignore that world. So there's a number of wrong turns here that organizations who are focused on digital and leave their IT behind can end up making. Migrating legacy apps to the cloud. This is a big problem. Take some old application, been running for years, you pick it up and stick it in the cloud. You know, the CIOs like that idea. Oh, we're in the cloud now. But you don't get the benefits of the cloud if you do that. You have to change that application. You have to update it. It has to support the new digital efforts. So it's not as easy as it sounds. Or big data strategies. A lot of you here, a lot of the exhibitors are dealing with information about customer behavior. Well, if you don't have a coherent strategy for collecting information, then you don't have a coherent big data strategy. So if your techies back in the back office have all these cool new big data technologies, and you don't have the right approach for collecting the information you need, then that can be a wrong turn as well. And then some organizations, they've been doing web for 20 years now, right? I was building websites in 1995. You probably have had a website for 20 years or whatever it is. Well, you can't just take those and turn them into mobile just by flipping a switch, right? Mobile and social require a newer way of thinking about those sorts of applications. So you can't just slap a mobile interface on an existing web app and hope to get the customer experience you want. So the bottom line is, remember that digital transformation isn't really about digital. That word digital is a bit misleading because we've been doing web for 20 years and we've been doing digital technology since the 1940s, right? That's not what's new. What's new is the transformation. Right? Transformation is not just about technology, it's about the organization as well, and balancing optimization and innovation in a way that gives you not just better key performance indicators, but gives you the strategic benefit of the digital effort that your organization is really looking for. Okay, so some advice. Well, the reorganization I'm talking about means thinking about how to deal with your organization differently. And some of the speakers this morning touched upon this, that they are doing this. Obviously, we had some innovative organizations present, so this is something that you would expect to see. Moving from high connectivity to low connectivity, both in terms of technology, where different people can use technology to now interact in a much more loose way, but also low connectivity in terms of people. So instead of having a rigid hierarchical management structure, you have semi-autonomous teams that are essentially innovation teams, or those skunk works groups that are going off and trying new things, still within the context of the overall organization. So you still have the goals of the organization and any compliance issues are being managed, but they're essentially semi-autonomous, self-organizing teams that are now essentially able to innovate. So this is a key challenge, is how do you get these traditionally organized organizations that have been faster, better, cheaper for decades to think about being more innovative organizations. And these teams, they should cut across organizational lines. And this is especially important with digital because there's always a bit of technology and there's always a bit of marketing and there's always a bit of customer interaction. You have to get all those people together, right? And they have to be able to work together, but you can't just say, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and say, okay, you're the digital team, right? You have to let them self-organize and work together to understand how they're going to innovate in this new landscape that digital gives us. So, challenge here are organizational silos, right? Big organizations in particular have long been organized in a siloed way. Right? Every line of business, every department has its own organization, its own requirements, its own way of doing things, and also its own technology. And this is part of why IT has been struggling for so many years, is every department wants their own apps, wants their own technology, and now IT is left saying, well, how do these things fit together? And that's been going on for so many years that it's just part of part of day-to-day life now, where IT is now spending all the time just trying to get stuff to talk to other stuff, right? And that increases cost, complexity, and brittleness. So you may already have a brittle organization inherently because you've had a siloed organization. And any very large organization has some level of this kind of silo problem. But organizational silos are only part of the story. Because if you look at the technology way the technology organization is set up, they have silos as well, right? We have different apps for different departments, and we also have infrastructure silos. So we might have this data center over here, and there's some sort of closet over there with some servers in it, or maybe you have that important marketing program running under your desk. Then you have the cloud. There's a bunch of stuff running there as well. So you have all of these heterogeneous platforms, different applications, and the organizational silos that limit the flexibility of the organization. So, bottom line is, it's time to take down the silos. There we are. Boom, okay. So, now this can be challenging, right? Because if you take a large organization, it's not like, oh, tell the boss, it's time to take down all the silos. Let's get rid of all the departments. Well, no, that's not what I'm saying here, right? What I'm saying is that in order to be more innovative and more resilient, you have to move away from a better, faster, cheaper mentality and think about self-organizing, cross-cutting teams that are essentially put together to drive innovation. And there's a level of risk involved, and dealing with risk is part of the resilience that is the benefit of taking this approach. So build cross-organizational teams, understand when to optimize and when to innovate. And this is a critical one because some managers do one, some managers do the other, but it's important to know when to do which. Embrace disruption. Disruption is at the root of innovation, and it's not just something to be avoided, but it's something to be embraced, because if you can disrupt yourself, then you can establish a strategic advantage in your marketplace. Encourage resilience, which means not just spending money on optimizing stuff, but spending money on making sure things don't break, including your organization. And then give people the tools they need and get out of their way. That's my lesson. That's my key bit of advice to all the managers in the room. If you want to be a manager in this new world of digital transformation, give people the tools they need, whether it's technology or human tools, and then get out of the way and let them organize themselves to achieve the benefits of innovation. So thank you very much. I have a poster here. I didn't want to hand it out to everybody, but I have enough for everybody, so by all means get my poster, and there's my email address and my Twitter handle.